a small takeaway coffee, a pint of lager, a 3-hour stay in a multi-storey car park, 269 penny sweets. Nope, this is not a recount of my Friday night. These are some of the things you could buy for the same cost as North for the Nintendo Switch. So is this the steal of the century, or just daylight robbery? Let's find out. Before we start, I just want to say a big thank you to developers Sometimes You for the review copy for this game. North is a first-person visual novel with light puzzle elements that releases on the 6th of March and will cost you £2.69. Yes, you heard that correctly, £2.69. It is meant to be a short, story-driven experience. In fact, the game tells you right at the start that it will only last for about an hour. The story of North is built on a very interesting premise. It tackles the sensitive issue of refugees and asylum, but wraps it in a dystopian cyberpunk setting. Being a huge fan of most things cyberpunk, especially video games with this setting, what I wouldn't give for the sublime Shadowrun from the Super Nintendo to grace the Switch one day, my interest was immediately piqued. The main premise is that a man has left his family in the famine-ravished land of the South to try and find a better life in the North. What he finds instead though is a land of hardship and strife. The story is told by sending letters to your sister. Basically, you explore your environment, clicking on certain items when prompted on screen to look, and when you have everything in an area, you visit a post box and the game will show you the letter that you are sending home, detailing your experiences. The story that is told is interesting, and I get the impression that George Orwell's 1984 had some influence on the developers of North. Story gets a 13 out of 20. When it comes to the music, I have to be fair and say that when I first started this game up and the music started playing, I don't think the game could have done much more to make a good first impression. The synth track that played was great and really reminded me of something you would hear in Blade Runner. Unfortunately, the game's sound never really hits that height again and ranges from quiet and unassuming to ear-splittingly manic as the game goes on, with a splash of silence in some places thrown in for good measure. It also stutters when there is a load screen, which is really jarring. This is indicative of a general lack of polish throughout the game, although again it's worth remembering the price point we are dealing with here. The music certainly starts promisingly and is passable after this, and it gets an 11 out of 20. As I mentioned briefly earlier, the gameplay works by you looking at parts of your environment. At certain points a letter icon will flash up, and this means you can visit a postbox to mail your latest letter home and progress the story. Make sure that you read these letters carefully, as a part highlighted in red will serve as a clue for how to pass a puzzle later on. Certain parts will be off limits to you at first. For example, your character mentions in a letter home that they are not allowed access to the upper floor via the elevator yet, as they have not proved themselves to be good enough workers. This is then followed by a section later in the game where you are at work and must prove yourself. Talking of the work section, this area caused me some problems. Now I won't go into specifics because I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say that there is an easily overlooked detail that can lead to you wasting a lot of time here without you ever knowing that you are doing something wrong or the game ever telling you. It's one of those click on everything in sight or you won't be able to progress moments that old school point and click games used to enjoy throwing at you. When I finally did work out what I had missed, the game then glitched and I had to start all over again. This, I'm sure you can understand, was highly annoying. The game has some creepy imagery in places and can also become quite surreal at times. It also attempts to deal with some serious issues within society via its narrative, but the problem is it all just seems a bit random, and I found myself just clicking on stuff quite a lot of the time in the hope of being able to move on. I know that the letters are meant to tell you what you need to know, but they don't convey it well enough in my opinion, and there is no inventory system or way to reread the letters either. It also seems like you will sometimes get a letter icon after you have failed a section, or you won't know you needed a clue until you are in the room with the puzzle in it. This then means that you'll have to leave the room with the puzzle in it, walk along trying to find the letterbox, post your letter into the letterbox, read the clue, and then go back to the room with the puzzle in it and retry again. I'm sure it seemed like a good idea on paper, but it just doesn't execute well in practice. The gameplay is very rough around the edges and unfortunately gets a score of 7 out of 20. When you put the phrases first person game and it costs £2.69 together, then I don't think you can expect the outcome to be anything other than ropey. This game looks like a late PS1, very early PS2 game. It's basically a PlayStation 1.5 game. Everything has this bizarre grainy look to it, and whereas in a game set in a dystopian future this may well have been intentional, it was a bad call if it was. It looks like you are playing the game on an old CRT TV. Something else I must mention about the graphics is the neon lights that are dotted around the street. The best way to describe them is that it's like looking at a 3D image without putting your 3D glasses on first, but instead of the blue and red blurry effect you get there, you get a fluorescent green and pink blurry effect. It's almost headache inducing. Also, one minute the game is very dark and it's difficult to see where you are going, and the next you are thrown into a section that is day glow orange and your retinas are catching on fire. This was not my idea of dystopian heaven, and graphics get a 7 out of 20. Value is a tough section to score. I mean, how harsh can you be on something that costs less than £3? Is that a fair price for an hour's gameplay? Well, at the end of the day, value should come down to enjoyment. Did I enjoy my time with the game? For the most part, no. I didn't, not really. I will be fair though and say that the developers have tried something bold here and have also known the limitations of their own game and therefore priced it accordingly. But a cheap price doesn't automatically mean a high score for value, and I give it 11 out of 20. In conclusion, while I applaud the developers for trying something different and at a cheap price point to boot, this is not a very good game, I'm afraid. A fair few of the games I have played recently have almost been experiences first and games second, and this game tries to be this, with it being a short story-based game with a powerful concept as its inspiration. But unfortunately, it isn't a very good experience either. North's biggest strength is undoubtedly the concept of its story, and I did find this intriguing and quite surreal, but I had to deal with some very irritating gameplay mechanics too. If you are desperate to spend exactly £2.69 on the eShop, buy Night Terrors instead. That game does cheap and cheerful in the right way. Alternatively, just buy the 269 penny sweets. North gets an overall score of 49%.